Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So today is actually going to be the last day I'm going to be working in this particular sketchbook because we are finally at the very end. So as you can see, I have filled this up quite a bit, but I like to do in kind of like an intro and an outro page, or like a welcome and kind of like a greeting page, or like a hello, goodbye page, whatever you want to call it. So to kind of like end the sketchbook, I want it to match kind of like the aesthetic or the same feeling as the front of the sketchbook. So I pulled out the old sticky note that I had for the concept of what I wanted. Now, I don't really remember entirely why I ended up going this route, other than the fact that I wanted to keep things much more simple to kind of make sure that the start of the sketchbook was not like super filled with pressure. So from what I remember, I wanted to keep things a little bit more on the monochromatic side, and I decided to kind of flip not the composition per se, but to kind of mirror my hello page. I ended up putting the goodbye on the inside cover where the back pocket is, and then have Kaisen on the inside page as well, kind of mirroring the hello page kind of like directly, just because I feel like when flipping through, it kind of just feels a little bit more complete that way instead of following the exact same format. So the thing that I wanted to keep is that Kaisen will have the tulip and like kind of like the same bouquet-esque kind of aesthetic to his kind of like aesthetic for the page. So I wanted to keep that the same. I did think for some reason him covering his face or like just obscuring his face in some kind of way fit the goodbye theme a little bit more better. So I ended up doing that and kind of showcasing more of the bouquet this time so that we can have a little bit more color. Now, for the text, I ended up doing it in the Pilot Color Eno in the color red. So right now you can see that I'm sketching kind of with a graphite mechanical pencil, and you can kind of see how easily it is for me to make marks on it, and you guys can see it via my camera quite easily versus me doing it with the Pilot Color Eno, which you'll see me do very shortly. So my plan is to follow the same format of doing my outlines in black. Then we can go ahead and use alcohol markers to do any of the colors that I want to add later. So the reason why I'm doing my text and some of the detailing in the color red on the right hand side is that I want to make sure that the marker stands out without having an outline. And sometimes when I press quite hard with the Pilot Color Eno in any color, I believe the alcohol marker just sits on top. It doesn't really like blend with it or anything, so it stands out a little bit too much. So like I mentioned, I was going to follow the same format of doing kind of like the outlines and the line work first with kind of like the same fine liners, but because of wanting to practice a little bit more with inking and getting used to these kinds of pens, I decided to pull out the calligraphy pens from a previous video and use those to kind of ink both Kaisen and the flowers and any other details we have for today's spread. You guys can let me know in the comments, do you guys do like a hello page or a goodbye page like to start or end your sketchbook? Do you do like some kind of, I don't know, like labeling of your sketchbook? Maybe it's like sketchbook number 14, sketchbook number 2 or whatever. Or do you keep it blank? Do you skip pages and eventually come back to the first page? Or like, how do you handle your sketchbook? A part of me feels like I typically do like doing the intro page first and then sketch later, but because I record videos at such weird times, I often have to record the video for the intro page a little bit later, but I usually have an urge to sketch something on like in my sketchbook a little bit impatiently, so I will often skip the first page and then sketch throughout the sketchbook a little bit until I have time to actually film and plan something for the intro page, and then that's kind of like the order. But whenever I actually date the sketchbook with the start date and the finish date, I will do it always on the day that I complete the illustration or whatever I wanted to do for that sketchbook. But if I start not on the first page, whatever page I end up starting as my first page in the sketchbook, let's say it's like the 7th page I decided to draw in, that is when I will start the start date of my sketchbook. So it's like accurate rather than just being like, oh, I'm gonna wait and keep waiting until I actually start the beginning of my sketchbook, because I don't wanna, I guess, like prevent myself from using it if I don't have to. So most likely I will like skip around and just skip the first page and do the first page whenever I have time. So let's talk about inking. I really want to get comfortable with using these pens just because I find them very versatile, and like I said, sometimes I am a little bit heavy-handed, or at least like I used to be back in like my teenage years. So I would squish down the nibs quite a bit and often render a lot of fine liners a little bit more useless or very hard to use because I press one side down so much to the point where it deforms like the felt nib or whatever it is, so that it doesn't really dispense like ink very easily. But these particular like calligraphy pens, they have like more of a firm yet squishy kind of tip, which makes it a little bit easier for me to manage. And I think like throughout the years I've been able to get a more steadier hand and I don't use as much pressure. So hopefully with that in mind, as well as just like being a little bit mindful when I ink, I want to be able to use these pens to my advantage as much as I can. It's like I want to take full advantage of these pens as much as I can, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to try my best to use them as much as I can in the next sketchbook, and hopefully, because I haven't picked what I'm going to be working in, like whether or not it's another artist sketchbook that I bought from an artist that I really like, or if it's going to be one of my blank notebooks once again, I need to see whether or not this pen will ghost or bleed through any of the paper. So once I can do a little bit of testing, then I will see whether or not I can use this just like constantly in that sketchbook. So hopefully, depending on when the sketchbook tour comes out, you guys will most likely get a look into what are like the potential sketchbook candidates, I guess is how I'm gonna say it or describe it as. But you probably won't see the actual reveal of which sketchbook I'm going to be using or notebook until the following Monday, or like next Monday, kind of like a week from today, probably. Depending on whether or not I can film the first page or not. But most likely, actually, because of the timing of when I'm recording this voiceover, I have yet to start a new sketchbook of any sorts. So it's been a little bit of like a few days in between. So I'm kind of like taking a break since Inktober. Maybe I'll talk about it in the next like sketchbook video where I can talk about my experience with Inktober this year, because I don't know if I like using a minimum color palette for the entire day. I might, or not the entire day, the entire month. I feel like I want to go back and do something monochromatic again, where it's actually just black and white. And I don't know, the colors that I chose were nice at the beginning, but then I ended up struggling a little bit, and then I ended up running out of ink for one of the pens, as well as, luckily, I guess like the gel pen thing that I was using, it didn't really run out until the last day. And then once the last day hit, I had like ended up switching the cartridge to another one, and I just had enough to continue to use that same pen. So in the future, I think I might just try my best to get used to inking so much so that I can maybe just use these pens in the future and do Inktober as just like the traditionally done black and white drawings, just because I would like to utilize more of like hatching and depicting of like value and stuff without having the crutch of such like washes or something like that. So we'll see. With that being said, hopefully your guys' Inktober went well, or if you guys did like Inktober, Drawtober, any kind of like art challenges of any sort, or if you just took a break. I know there's like that little meme version where your Drawtober, or is it, I think it's something else, but basically like every day of the month is basically resting or sleeping instead. So, you know, take a good time to actually like get some rest and recharge yourself instead of like pushing yourself to need to draw every day. Because, you know, even though it's good to build like a drawing habit or a sketchbook habit, it's not like super necessary if you don't need to. Like putting the pressure can definitely kind of like damper your outlook on art sometimes, because, you know, it's supposed to be meant for fun as long as you're not doing it for like, let's say a client, or like you have to do it for work or something. Then you don't need to force yourself to have deadlines if you don't need to. You can definitely keep it very casual and keep it very fun so that things can be still fun and fresh for you every time you return back to doing art. So hopefully Inktober didn't really drain that fun for you guys as much. It definitely just made me a little bit tired sometimes, because inking does take quite a while depending on what I'm drawing, or like depending on the day. Some days feel longer, some days feel shorter. But I think overall, like, it was still very fun to do, and it definitely propelled me to draw a lot more in the sketchbook. Like, other than drawing for Inktober, which would have been like about 15 to 16 spreads in my sketchbook, it made me want to draw outside of the Inktober, so I ended up really kind of like expediting the duration of my sketchbook compared to previous years. Oh, also, similar to my front page of my, I guess like the hello page, I ended up drawing a little bit of like branches and flowers to kind of frame the goodbye text that will be on the right hand side. And I forgot to show it, but I do end up using the Ohuhu markers for the alcohol marker portion. So I picked a very neutral gray, which I think is the same gray that I ended up using, but the purple and the green that I used for Kaisen's bouquet this time around is definitely different compared to the previous version, which I think the purple looks a little bit more like pinky and a little bit more warmer compared to the other one, and then the green that I use is slightly darker and a little bit more saturated, so it doesn't have that exact same almost like pastel vibe versus like the color palette that I end up for this one, which I actually really like the look of the end page more so than the intro page. So maybe it's a good thing I didn't choose the right colors. But yeah, I don't know, for me, the idea of like an intro and outro page is just kind of fun to start and end the sketchbook kind of like in the same way, and kind of keep it as like a little mini theme for myself. But sometimes it's a little bit too much pressure, because I think a lot of people experience the same thing. The first page is very daunting usually, and it's one of the only pages in my sketchbook that I actually end up planning, I guess, like for my spreads. I know there's some like that I end up just planning in general, but that's usually for like illustrations or drawings that I want to do outside of my sketchbook. Whenever it comes to like spreads, I just sketch and then kind of like fill up the page, and then I can erase if I need to and all that jazz, and I don't really like plan ahead per se. But usually to have my hello page and my goodbye page kind of match together, I do like to pre-think of the theme a little bit and then think of the format so that they can match a little bit more aesthetically in a sense. But with that being said, anytime I think if you want your sketchbook to look more pleasing and aesthetic, it's like applying another layer of pressure. But I guess like on the flip side, actually it might depend. I was gonna say the gratification that you get from seeing like an aesthetic page that you did could be nice, but is it worth it? I'm not too sure. But oftentimes, yeah, I will plan usually matching spreads for those, and have one character or person to be kind of like the center of the entire spread. So for me, I've done mostly alternating between my OC Masaki and then usually Wahoo from 17, because I love drawing him a lot. I might return back because I do miss making 17 fan art, but like I mentioned in many previous other videos, that I've been just enjoying watching their content, supporting them and all that stuff, kind of like as not super active on the fan art side, because I felt too much pressure to be like, hey, their comebacks here, you should draw something. Oh, so-and-so has a activity or a promotion, you should draw something. It feels like a lot of pressure to keep up, and if I don't keep up, I feel like the time frame or time window has like passed, so it's like irrelevant, if that makes sense. I know I should get over that and just draw whatever I want to draw, but sometimes the pressure is just a little bit too much, so I've been straying away from drawing as much 17 fan art lately. But there's a lot of Wahoo photos that I want to draw, from like concert photos that people have taken or like fan signing photos. But we are nearing the end of the video because I've rambled way too long. But this time I did my OC Kaisen. Maybe I'll do one of my other OCs for the next little spread. But you can kind of see the colors kind of match here and there. This one definitely has a lot more of that green color, and the green's a little bit more on that warmer yellowish side. But I think it's still very cute, and I do like the bouquet a lot. And I went ahead and filled out the little end date for my sketchbook, which happens to be Halloween. And I think it's perfect timing, because if I didn't finish my sketchbook by the time Inktober happened, there was no way it was going to happen before because Inktober needed to be completed in the sketchbook for it to be completed. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time, hopefully for the sketchbook tour. Bye!